Good Saturday morning after the Epiphany. Today's reading is tricky, okay? Especially from John. I'm going to read it to you and then I'll give you my 2 cents. And really, it is 2 cents, okay? It's just my opinion. Everything else is my opinion too, but it's really my opinion, all right? I'm no scholar on this stuff. We have this confidence in him that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. If we ask anything according to his will, he answers us. Thy will be done. You see, the Our Father. And if we know that he hears us in regard to whatever we ask, we know that what we have asked him for, is ours. Now, here's what he goes on and says. This is the tricky part. If anyone sees his brother sinning, not his sister, but you know what I mean. If the sin is not deadly, you should pray to God that he will give him life. This is only for those whose sin is not deadly. There is such a thing as deadly sin, about which I do not say that you should pray. All wrongdoing is sin, but there is sin that is not deadly. We know that anyone begotten by God does not sin, but the one begotten by God, he begotten by God he protects, and the evil one cannot touch him. We know that we belong to God, and the whole world is under the power of the evil one. Remember how he uses the word world. We also know that the Son of God has come and has given us discernment to know the one who is true. We are in the one who is true. We are in the one who is true, his Son, Jesus Christ. He is true God and eternal life. Children, be on your guard against idols. That's a powerful line. One of these deadly sins, what we used to call mortal sins, we still do. Gosh, I remember. I know I keep beating this to death, but to me, I cannot. If you're old, as I am, don't tell me this hasn't been part of your religious cultural background. Don't tell me that. If you were young, lower than 60, younger than 60 or 50, probably not. But in our time, yes. We had mortal sins. We had so many. When we used to go to confession, we used to line up our mortals and our venials, our mortal sins. And that was everything. Missing Mass on Sunday. I'll give you one that's a trickier one. There's two that really show you the absurdity of it all. Can I mean that? God help us. How could we have descended to such barbaric Pharisaism? If you were late for Mass, it was a venial sin unless you came in after the offertory. Then it was a mortal sin, so you would go to hell for it. And the other one, which was really, really good, was eating meat on Friday. That one sticks out in my mind. It was meant to be penitential, and that is understandable, but it's when the lawyers got a hold of it. And of course, to give it to lawyers, they could fine-tune it. So you were able to eat up to 2 ounces of meat on a Friday without committing a mortal sin, maybe venial, but not mortal. After 2 ounces, let's say 3, you were a goner. My father didn't give a crap about that stuff, so he was wolfing down a steak one day on Good Friday. We were eating fish or eggs or whatever, but he was wolfing a steak. I said, Pop, you're going to go to hell. I was a kidding. He said, don't be a fanatic. Boy, did he have that right. Did he ever have it right? I looked to my father for wisdom. So many of those Italians saw through the stupidity of that period. They saw it. There used to be a saying, the Italians made the rules, the Germans interpreted the rules, and the Americans kept the rules. That's a true story. Italians didn't keep it. They knew it was nonsense. It was nonsense. Then what would a mortal sin be? Well, it's in the context. Be on your guard against idols. What would be the ultimate idol? False worship. To worship an alien god. What would that come out to? Betrayal. In the ancient world, it wasn't missing Mass on Sunday. It was betrayal. Apostasy. That's the fatal sin, is to reject Christ. You can't come back from that if you, in fact, reject him from your heart and you idolize another deity. You make an idol out of something else. It could be your pride. It could be anything. When you've abandoned Christ, you have abandoned hope. Why he said not to pray for him is tricky for me, okay? I think he says that if you want to see the sin is not deadly, you should pray for him, okay? See? He says you shouldn't pray. I guess because, I don't know. I don't know, because I think their sin is scandalous, because it leads others to betray the gospel, the others to betray Christ. I think I don't know what he meant by that. What I do know is I certainly pray for those who have abandoned Christ. I pray for them all the time. Because they're not guilty, in my view, of apostasy or the attempt to overthrow the gospel or to radically deny Christ. But for whatever reason, they do deny Christ. I walk away. To me, that isn't apostasy as much as it's tragedy. It's not something to be feared, but something to feel deep regret about. I mean that too. So many of the people in my life have abandoned the faith. I think God would be very merciful towards them. I think many of them are rejecting the church. And in my age group, they're rejecting the 50s. If I didn't grow up in the monastery from 59 on in our passionate spirituality, which is spirituality of the crucified love of Christ, just threw out all that stuff of the 50s and put it at least in context, trivialized context, I don't know if I still have the faith today either. But if you start with the crucified Christ, the love of God, incarnate on the cross, giving birth to hope and wisdom, and if you really, really see that and understand it, then you will not walk away from it. But if what you see, in some senses, the superficial hypocrisy of the church, its conformalism to rules without a corporate vision in the passion of Christ, the suffering of the God-man, no wonder you walk away. I'd walk away too. If I weren't a passionist, I'd question whether I'd still have the faith, to be honest about it, given where I came from. I don't know about young people today, but I do know what it was then. And so many of my friends, perhaps my family, although I don't see it in my family, I see it in my friends, who were pious beyond belief, who are now atheists with conviction. Are they guilty of this mortal sin? I say the mortal sin might be those who drove him away. Yeah, the church. When a friend of mine left the faith, I said, "What did we do to you?" And I meant the church. How do we drive you away? I meant it. Nobody walks away from the church because they got nothing else to do, or they're in love with idolatry or some kind of ideology. It's because the church has appeared to them to be ugly. Not a beautified sacrificial Christ, a disfigured Christ on the cross, but an ugly church. I see that in many ways in the women of the church, the women who have walked away from the church. I guess if I were a woman, I'd have real problems with the intense patriarchalism of the church and its hierarchy and its priesthood. I really got to wonder. On the other hand, I look at the Catherine of Siena's and the Teresa of Avila's and the Teresa of the Child Jesus, and I see the great reformers of the church, the great mystics of the church, and I think you got the better deal rather than some superficial priesthood. It's more external than internal. I mean that, being honest. But you can't turn ugly into beauty unless you have heart open to see the beauty. And there may be reasons why you don't see the church's beauty, because the church has presented herself to us and to you as ugly. I can see that. I don't think it's the people who walked away have to answer. I think it's for those of us who drove them away. I think we're the ones who have to answer. God save us from our scandal, the scandal we have given. And I don't mean by that using bad words. I'm talking about preaching a false and ugly gospel, a gospel of law and rules and mortal sins, instead of a gospel of love, crucified love on the cross. You preach Christ crucified, died, and risen, you'll change the world. Preach Pharisaism. No, you won't. You'll drive away anyone with an IQ over 10. Anyone who any sense at all will walk away because it's not the gospel. They'll seek a gospel elsewhere. I can't say I blame them. I'm grateful that I am a passionist. I contemplate the suffering of Christ, the crucified Christ, and in that I find hope and trust and love, not ugliness, but sheer beauty.